So if you're in the research industry, chances are at one point or another, you've done a qualitative project like a focus group or an in-depth interview. And there are lots of reasons to do qual. It could be for foundational learning. It could be getting feedback on early stage product lines or marketing campaigns, or digging deeper into a consumer segment. And a critical piece to the qualitative puzzle is the discussion guide. Now, being able to create an effective discussion guide is an essential part for a researcher's job. And I've got a few tips and tricks I've learned that can help you get the most out of your consumer conversations. So, first things first, you're going to want to create a framework of what you want covered in the discussion. I recommend starting with your original objectives for the study, which could be for a standalone project, or maybe you've got a larger research plan that includes other phases before and after this one. Whichever it is, usually I like to meet with the cross-functional team members who are involved in the project and review all the goals and critical questions that you want to answer and ensure you've got everything covered. And once you got that, then you could start crafting the structure, the flow, and the questions. Now, one thing to remember when you're working through this, a discussion guide is called a guide for a reason. There isn't, it's not like a survey where every question that you write down will be exactly how it gets asked in that specific order. This is a conversation, and there needs to be flexibility in the discussion because the participants may end up taking you in a different direction. That's worth exploring to possibly uncover some hidden gems that you weren't even thinking of. Now, don't get me wrong. There's also times where respondents may go down a tangent about random subjects like their pets or their kids that aren't relevant at all. And a skilled moderator is going to know when to sniff that out, and they can get the discussion back on track. So don't waste valuable time learning about something insignificant. All right, so let's talk about discussion flow. I suggest starting broad and then work your way down to more depth as you go. So think of it like a funnel where you're going from top down. So for instance, start with some basic questions about the industry or the category, then go one level down to the competitive set, and then you can get into your brands. You never want to start conversations by saying something like, hey, what do you think about this product? Because now you've biased them, and that brand will be top of mind for them when you go back to try to get industry related information later on. Having a good flow is key because you don't want it to come off like you're jumping around. Respondents will probably get confused and then they'll start to lose. You'll start to lose them mid discussion. So instead, construct your guide in a way that takes them on a journey that eventually leads them to your product or service. All right, so now you've got your framework and the right flow, and you can start pulling together the components of the guide. A good moderator will set some ground rules up front. So they may say that they work with a third party and they're not associated with the category or the brands that you're going to be discussing. So whatever you tell them, they won't take it personal. And if this is a focus group, they may also remind them that everyone gets a chance to talk. So be sure to speak your mind and most importantly, be honest because there are no bad ideas. I think it's always good to build rapport with respondents early on. So I also like to start with an icebreaker in the beginning of my discussion guide to get them comfortable. So it could be anything, and it's fine if it's somewhat related to the subject that you're talking about, as long as you don't get too detailed and give anything away. So for instance, if the focus group is for a cereal brand, you could have them start by talking about what their typical breakfast eating habits are in the morning. And that's actually a nice segue for when you kick off the discussion about the broader breakfast category. All right, so do you have any stimulus that you want to show? It could be a rough cut of a new ad, a collection of concepts, or maybe a mood board for a new product launch. Have those prepared and signed off on well in advance, and make sure to test your audio and visual before that qual piece starts. There's nothing worse than having respondents sit idly waiting for you to try and get the tech working. All right, and regarding stimulus, one mistake I've seen in the past in groups is where it's treated like a quant project. And what I mean by that is showing concepts one by one and asking whether respondents like it. So this isn't a survey and you don't have a robust enough sample size to get an accurate read anyway. So avoid falling into that trap. You have limited precious time to learn from consumers. So a good rule of thumb in your discussion guide is focusing on the who, what, when, where, and most importantly, why. All right, so as you get into the core of the discussion guide, it's good to add in some exercises to break up the conversation and get them thinking more creatively. I suggest using projective techniques like laddering exercises or mind maps to get respondents talking. You could have them start it individually first as not to bias each other, and then they can come back and share with the group. You can discuss and you can probe further. Just make sure that as you're digging deeper, that you don't ask questions in a positive or negative fashion that could lead them to an answer that you want. So keep your questions straightforward and ambiguous, and let the respondent take you there instead. And avoid asking questions that could have a simple yes or no response. Instead, keep them open-ended in nature so it prompts them to tell you a story. And then finally, leave some time at the end as more of an open forum to allow them to tell you whatever you may have missed along the way. You could even structure it as a question like, okay, if you had 10 minutes with the CEO of this company, what would you want to tell them? Sometimes there could be some really insightful discussion that comes out of that. And quite honestly, the key, as always, is to always be listening. Okay, so time for my life hack of the day. So I had to hang a TV recently, and I'm not a fan of exposed wires. I prefer a very clean look when it comes to my electronics. So when I do this, I like to hide the wires in the wall. But if you ever tried feeding that TV plug down through the wall, it never goes as planned. It ends up getting bunched up and it just doesn't work. So I've got your hack. Take a piece of string long enough to cover the distance from where the TV is all the way down to the outlet. And you're going to add a little extra on either end of the string so you've got some extra to play with. And take a nut and tie the nut to the end of the string. Feed that down through the wall. And then at the other end, you can attach your TV cord, pull it back up. And then that way you've got a nice clean look with your electronics setup. That's it for me. We will see you next time.